It is yet another edition of ResearchULL Academic Coaching Section. I must say welcome and thank you for joining us today. I promise you this section will be mind-blowing because we have with us a seasoned, experienced researcher with research collaborations in different parts of the world. He is an assistant professor, a linguist. As you can see, we have the right person with us who can tell us the nitty-gritties, the rudiments we need to know about academic writing that is rooted in sound language ethics. I would urge you to pick your pen and paper because you will be jotting down great points that will help you to write that thesis, journal article, book chapter. The list continues. Like as I said, it's going to be mind-blowing. His accolades is too many for me to mention. I will allow him to introduce himself properly as we go into the section. But before I hand over to Dr. Chima, I will urge you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and follow us across all our social media platforms, and do visit the blog page on our website as we do upload valuable content that you will never regret reading. So Dr. Chima, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Chimobionkwe. I'm currently an assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics and Communication Studies of Abia State University, Turu, Nigeria. I have been in the university system for over a decade now. I've had connections, research connections in different countries of the world, like in South Africa, recently in Finland, in the UK, and in the US as well. Briefly, I'll just be discussing understanding the language of academic writing. I'm not going to be theoretical about this. I'm simply going to be sharing some of the experiences I've had for over a decade now in research and research writing, academic writing. Every field has some peculiar features in terms of writing. It cuts across every field. In those in medical profession, those in legal profession, those in mass communication, there are these peculiar features in terms of writing that you have in every field. And the research academic field is not an exception. So for us in academics, we also have some peculiar features of writing, the way we write to communicate the ideas or the facts or the things that we want to share with people. And I'll just be running through some of the tips I think would help you in the course of your career as an academic and in this very important task of academic writing. Now, another thing you have to note is that every write-up has its audience. I mean, the audience differ. They differ across the fields. In medicine, if you're writing something for in medicine, you as a medical person, you're addressing those in the medical line or those who have interest in medicine, same as in legal profession. And in academics as well, when you are writing, you also have to bear in mind that you are addressing an academic community. Now, that translates to the fact that academic community is a very formal community. You have to bear that in mind. Any kind of writing, particularly if you're writing your thesis or your dissertation or your journal article, you want to publish it, you need to understand, you need to bear it in mind that you are addressing a very formal academic community. Those days in school, we were taught how to write letters, formal letters and informal letters, So that could give you a sense of what I want to say here. We all know the features of informal letter and then we know the features of formal letter. Now, you have to understand that academic writing, it's very formal. It's very formal. That understanding alone will affect a whole lot of things. It will impact on so many things about your writing. If you are conscious of the fact that this is formal, it is not by any means informal, it is very, very strictly formal. I'll quickly run through some of the tips I think you need to take note of. Number one is that you need to be formal even in style of point presentation. Now, traditionally, we've been told two basic styles of point presentation. We have the inductive and we have the deductive. For the inductive, you have to state the point and then you support it with some premises or some reasons or some background. Now, for deductive, which is as opposed to inductive, you have to provide some background, you have to provide some reasons or some premises from which you deduce your main point. Now, because academic writing is formal, we don't have the leisure of adopting the deductive style of point presentation. So we go for inductive because it's very formal. And you have, so what that means is that when you are writing an academic write-up, if it's a thesis, if it's a dissertation, any point you want to make, you go ahead, you just go straight and make that point. That's the inductive kind of style presentation. You make that point and then you can now support it with some reasons, some premises, or some background. But you don't give us excessive background, you don't give us premises or reasons before you even state the point. So that's not very advisable in academic writing. That's the first thing to note. And now the second thing to note is that academic writing is also formal in terms of diction, in terms of vocabulary. That will simply mean the kind of words that you use. That in every field, you are also very selective of the choice of words you use in writing. The same applies for academic writing. You are very selective of the kind of words that you use. And because we know that we are addressing a very formal community, our choice of words has to be formal. We don't use colloquial expressions. We don't use jargons. We don't use slang expressions. As much We try as much as possible to avoid these. We don't excessively use abbreviations. So we are very, very formal in our choice of words. We use words, if for any reason we have to use slang, we have to use jargons, we have to use colloquial expressions, we have to provide their meanings or we explain them in a very formal way. But it is advised that you reduce to very barest minimum the use of colloquial expressions, the use of slang expressions. And another aspect of these being formal with regard to words or with regard to the choice of words is that we don't use very high esoteric words. We don't, academic writing, yes, it's formal, but we try to make it very conversational. We don't try to impress anybody. There's one thing we normally say when you write to express and not to impress. Some people fall into this trap. You are conscious that you are addressing a formal community and maybe you want to show them that you're well read, or you want to show them that you have a good command of English or any language that you're using to document your report. But it's not necessary, actually, because you write to express. We are interested in what you're saying. Academic write-up, it's about focusing on what is it that you're saying. We're not interested in how you sound highfalutin, how you sound esoteric, how you sound cerebral. No, we're interested in how communicating facts, communicating results. So you try as much as possible to avoid esoteric words, um, words that sound highfalutin, words that uh, are not like everyday words that we use. So we make our expressions very conversational. We use very simple words that anybody will understand and that won't be ambiguous. Because one thing about using these very high words in quotes is that sometimes they could be ambiguous. It could be in the context that you're using them, and so you misrepresent the facts that you want to communicate, or you even not properly disseminate the results of your research. So with regard to the words, we try as much as possible to be very formal. With regard to the sentences, the structure of what you're writing, there's this acronym that I've come to adopt, and I often adopt it when I'm writing for academic purposes, and that is keep it short and simple. I'm conscious of the fact my sentences, my constructions have to be short and simple. In academic writing, we don't advise people to have very complex sentences or very compound sentences. You don't make sentences lean on themselves. When you do that, one of the things that you will end up doing is that you make it difficult for your reader to pick the information. And facts are very important for as a researcher. The results that you're communicating from your research and which you want to disseminate are very important. So whatever that will undermine the dissemination of this result has to be played down. So one of which is using complex sentences, making sentences to lean on themselves. You make a sentence and you just keep joining sentences on them, at the end of which it will be difficult for your reader to actually grasp what is it that you're saying. So you keep sentences very short, very simple, very short, very simple. That translates to not using complex sentences, compound sentences. So it's not bad for you to use short sentences. Yeah, it's allowed for you to use short sentences. I want to believe that the default language that we are referring to here is English. And so you need to be in command of the grammatical rules of the language. To a very large extent, one will be expecting that an academic write-up is error-free, but it's not always the case. And so because it's a formal write-up, people expect some advanced level in the use of language. That means that you have to be in command of the grammatical rules of the language. For instance, you need to know the subject-verb agreement rules, the Concord rules of English. It's very important. It could be embarrassing for someone to pick up a paper or your thesis or your dissertation, and then you see the writer fumble with the use of verbs, not knowing, when to use singular and plural and all of that. Oh, it could be very embarrassing. Yeah. Sometimes you just put the person off. Yeah, because it's formal and the person has a level of expectation when you're reading academic work. And so that is why in some areas, in some clients, they advise that when you're done writing with your draft of your academic work, or it could be a thesis, it could be a dissertation, then you give it for editorial, some kind of editorial work or proofreading. For some people to work on the manuscript with regard to looking at some errors in terms of grammatical rules and grammatical agreements that you need to have. So it's very, 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 very important. Very, very, extremely important for in academic writing. The issue of paragraphing is also very important. It's one aspect that people don't also have problems. People have problems with paragraphing because that, of course, draws from the fact that this is a formal writing. If it's informal, you could just have your way, move from one paragraph to another, and then arrange your points the way you want them. But in academic writing, you fall back to the traditional reason for paragraphing. which is that every paragraph must have a central idea. And every other thing that you write within that paragraph should talk about that central idea. And if you need to express another central idea, then there has to be a paragraph. So you don't just jump from one idea to another within a paragraph. No. So it's a formal write-up. Every paragraph should focus on one central idea, and every other sentence that you have there should make reference to that. Every other sentence that you have within that paragraph should make reference to that central idea. Another aspect, which of course we have touched partly, is about being unnecessarily stylistic. I had experience of one master's student I supervised some years back, and I noticed that the person was quite at home with style, a lot of style in writing, very stylistic in writing, sometimes using unnecessary analogies. You want to make a point and then you make you draw on analogies. Sometimes you make references to stories, you make references to idioms, you make references to proverbs. Those are not necessary. You're just being stylistic. Remember, this is a very formal write-up. And so you try as much as possible to be very formal. There's no need to be stylistic. And again, another aspect of this issue of being stylistic is the use of certain expressions, like nevertheless, like therefore, like furthermore. Uh, we such expressions, yes, they could occur at one point or the other, but we try to play them down, because one thing about the use of these expressions, that they give the impression that you're telling a story, and that is not what it is in research. You're stating facts, you're reporting results of research that you have done. And so you try as much as possible to play down the use of these expressions, nevertheless, furthermore, in furtherance, in pursuance. Some of these expressions should be avoided. Now you see that by the time that you are able to follow the very be formal in terms of your style of point presentation, you'll be formal in terms of your choice of words, the diction. You'll be formal in terms of observing the grammatical rules of the language that you're using. You'll be formal in terms of not being with regard to not being stylistic in your write-up, and then you'll be formal with regard to observing the conventional writing styles like paragraphing and all that. You'll be able to effectively communicate the facts that you want to communicate, and also disseminate the results, your research results. So I believe that with this very short piece, that you would be able to fit in very well in terms of academic writing. Thank you very much.